Usually when you walk into a car dealership, the vibe is it's entirely engineered around emotion.
Oh, absolutely. It's a complete sensory overload right from the minute you step onto the lot.
Right, exactly. I mean, the salesperson wants you to smell the stitched leather. They want you to feel the vibration of the engine through the steering wheel. They almost always start talking about the soul of the car. It's all explicitly designed to bypass your logical brain and, go straight for your pulse.
Yeah, the automotive industry has spent over a century perfecting that. They sell an identity rather than just, well, a mode of transportation.
But imagine replacing that typical emotionally susceptible customer with someone completely immune to all of it. Someone who just ignores the aggressive styling, refuses to acknowledge the famous badge, and instead just demands empirical mathematical proof that the vehicle's propulsion system is the most efficient use of geometric space.
Which is a hilarious image. And that buyer is René Descartes.
Right, the 17th century father of modern philosophy. And today, for our deep dive, we're taking him and forcing him to buy a 21st century car.
It sounds absurd, but it turns out to be a phenomenal lens for looking at modern transportation. We are pulling from some really insightful articles today, specifically Cartesio Gemini and Cartesio Perplexity, which explore this exact hypothetical scenario.
And the mission here is to figure out, based strictly on his principles of logic and mathematics, what kind of vehicle Descartes would actually drive off the lot today.
Because, since Descartes practically invented analytic geometry, he wouldn't look at a car as a vehicle, right? He'd look at it as a rolling physics equation.
So to really understand his choice, we first have to look at the mechanical world the way he did. His philosophy of mechanism is central here.
Yeah, mechanism. He viewed the physical world not as a place of mystery, but as this giant, intricate clockwork. Everything is regulated by strict mathematical laws.
Which forces an immediate kind of brutal confrontation with the internal combustion engine.
Oh, big time. Because if the universe is an elegant, calculable clock, a gas engine is an incredibly brute force way to generate motion.
It really is. Think about the sheer physics of it. An internal combustion engine is basically a metal box where we create thousands of tiny violent explosions every single minute.
Just to force pistons up and down.
Right. You have extreme heat, massive amounts of friction, and a complex sequence of thermodynamics simply to turn a drive shaft. I mean, it feels like controlled chaos.
And that chaos is deeply offensive to Cartesian sensibilities. For Descartes, the physical world is defined by what he called res extensa matter, extending through space.
So he wanted to understand motion through pure geometry.
Exactly. And the internal combustion engine relies on the messy physical violence of burning fossil fuels. You're dealing with all these unpredictable variables like fuel quality, air density, mechanical wear.
I see the logic, but wait, I have to push back a little. If Descartes wants absolute verifiable truth, wouldn't a purely mechanical analog car like a 1960s combustion engine where you can physically see the carburetor and the gears, wouldn't that be easier to physically verify than a modern electric vehicle wrapped in closed source code?
That is a very fair pushback, but it misinterprets what kind of simplicity Descartes actually valued.
Oh, how so?
Well, he wasn't looking for mechanical transparency where you can just see the parts moving. He was looking for mathematical elegance. When you contrast a combustion engine with an electric motor through his lens, the internal combustion engine is a system fighting against itself.
Right, because of the waste.
Exactly. It requires radiators to dump wasted heat energy, oil to prevent the metal parts from destroying each other, heavy exhaust systems to manage the toxic byproducts of the explosions.
Whereas an electric motor operates on fundamentally different physical principles.
Precisely. An EV relies on electromagnetism. You have a stator creating a rotating magnetic field that just pulls the rotor along with it.
With very few moving parts.
Right. And no explosions. The power delivery is entirely linear. Instead of relying on controlled explosions, you're relying on the invisible, mathematically perfect forces of magnetic attraction and repulsion.
So it's less about being able to see the gears turning and more about the underlying physics behaving like a pure frictionless equation.
Yes, exactly.
You could compare the internal combustion engine to like a chaotic kitchen during a dinner rush. Pots clanging, things boiling over, massive energy wasted just to get a plate out, while the electric motor is like a magnetic pendulum. Pure, frictionless, geometric momentum.
That analogy captures his preference perfectly. For Descartes, the electric vehicle represents the ultimate victory of what he called geometric reason.
Because it replaces thermodynamic chaos with calculable physics.
Yes. It's a system of electrons moving through circuits in highly predictable ways. To him, an EV isn't just an environmentally greener choice. It's the only philosophically rational choice for generating motion.
But recognizing the physical perfection of the electric motor is really only half the battle. To actually use the car daily, Descartes has to interface with the vehicle's software, its battery, and its dashboard.
And historically, he refused to trust any information that wasn't mathematically absolute. Which brings us to methodic doubt.
Methodic doubt. That's arguably his most famous contribution to human thought, right?
It is. It's the practice of systematically rejecting any belief or piece of information that can possibly be doubted. If there's even a fraction of a percent of uncertainty, you throw it out. You only build your knowledge on things that are clear and distinct.
Applying that to a modern EV seems like a recipe for a massive panic attack. I mean, anyone who drives an electric car knows the battery range indicator is highly subjective.
Oh, yeah. The EV community literally calls it the guessometer.
Right. The number fluctuates based on, whether you have the heater on, if you're driving up a hill, or even just what the ambient temperature is outside.
He would suffer from the most intense philosophical range anxiety imaginable. He would completely reject the dashboard's estimate because it relies on probabilistic algorithms.
Because a heuristic prediction of human driving behavior is the exact opposite of clear and distinct knowledge.
Exactly. So he would probably ignore the screen entirely. He'd demand the raw empirical data. He'd want the real-time kilowatt-hour usage per mile, the battery degradation curves, ambient temperature.
I can just picture him sitting in his driveway calculating the exact aerodynamic drag of the vehicle against the current wind speed before he even shifted into drive.
He really would mathematically calculate his own range every single trip. But while he would distrust the predictive dashboard, our sources point out that he'd be absolutely enamored with the systems that manage the energy behind the scenes.
You mean like the for charging schedules?
Yes. When an EV communicates with the electrical grid, calculates when electricity is most abundant and cheapest, and schedules its own charging cycle, that is profoundly rational.
Sometimes even preconditioning the battery temperature for optimal efficiency before you unplug.
Right. It is order imposed on a massive, chaotic physical grid.
It turns a volatile system into a predictable function. Still, I do have to wonder about the human element here. Because driving isn't purely a mathematical exercise of getting from point A to point B for most people.
Well, no, not for most people.
People buy certain EVs for the instant torque, the aggressive acceleration that pins you to the seat. Does Descartes factor in the physical sensation of driving or the aesthetic pleasure of a nice interior?
He dismisses it entirely. And this connects directly to his concept of dualism. Descartes drew an absolute impenetrable line between the mind res cogitans and physical matter res extensa.
The classic mind-body split.
A very severe split. For him, the mind is the realm of pure, rational thought and truth. The body, on the other hand, is just plumbing, mechanics, and sensory input. And he famously argued that our senses frequently deceive us.
So human emotions, the thrill of speed, the comfort of plush leather, they're all just
messy bodily illusions. They have zero bearing on rational truth. The desire to signal status through a luxury badge is completely irrelevant to him.
So his criteria are strictly confined to aerodynamic efficiency, maintenance costs, charging infrastructure, and documented environmental data. It's a very cold utilitarian approach to mobility.
It is cold, but it leads to a truly fascinating conclusion when you factor in his views on consciousness. Descartes had a rather controversial belief that non-human animals were essentially soulless automatons.
Right, because they lacked the ability to reason.
Exactly. He categorized them as highly complex biological machines acting purely on mechanical instinct, without any internal conscious experience.
Okay, if he views complex, seemingly intelligent actions as something that can be executed purely by mechanical programming without a soul, then, it seems obvious where this leads. His ideal car wouldn't need a human driver at all. He'd be obsessing over autonomous driving technology.
You would consider autonomous driving the absolute pinnacle of human achievement. Think about how a system like Waymo or Tesla's full self-driving actually works. It uses LiDAR, radar, and cameras to map the chaotic physical world into a massive three-dimensional point cloud.
It literally plots the real world onto a Cartesian coordinate system.
The very mathematical system he invented. An autonomous vehicle maps reality into X, Y, and Z coordinates, calculates vectors, predicts trajectories, and executes motion based entirely on geometry.
So to him, software calculating a parallel parking maneuver is the supreme proof of reason applied to matter.
Precisely. He would probably argue that the car should drive itself at all times. From his perspective, the vehicle's computer relies on deductive geometric logic, whereas a human driver relies on flawed sensory input, emotional reactions, and fatigue.
The human is the chaotic variable in the system.
Yes, the autonomous EV is the perfect soulless automaton he theorized about 4 centuries ago. It is purely mechanical, governed entirely by logic, and capable of navigating the world without consciousness.
Okay, so taking all these incredibly strict philosophical boundaries, the demand for mathematical efficiency, transparent energy data, total rejection of emotional branding, and this deep appreciation for algorithms, we finally arrive at the dealership.
The ultimate question.
Yeah, what are the actual keys Descartes is walking away with today?
Well, our sources suggest that rationality in the automotive market can actually be optimized in 2 different directions, depending on which variable you prioritize. This leaves Descartes with 2 distinct but equally logical approaches.
Okay, let's explore approach number 1.
Approach 1 optimizes for the absolute pinnacle of mathematical engineering. If his goal is to see universal math applied to physical reality to its maximum potential, minimizing physical resistance at all costs, he might choose something like a Lucid Air or a Tesla Model S Plaid.
Wait, hold on. Those are six-figure luxury vehicles. We just established he doesn't care about status, aesthetics, or plush leather. Why would he spend that much capital on a luxury sedan?
Because he wouldn't be buying them for the luxury. He'd be buying them for the physics. The Lucid Air, specifically, is renowned for its obsessive engineering focus. Its aerodynamic drag coefficient is incredibly low, meaning it slices through the physical air with minimal energy waste. And the engineers have miniaturized the electric motors to an absurd degree, maximizing the thermal efficiency of the battery pack.
Oh, so he's looking completely past the premium price tag and drooling over the thermal management system. He just sees the high price as the cost of acquiring the ultimate clockwork universe on 4 wheels.
Yes, it represents the absolute current limit of human ability to reduce physical friction through advanced geometry. But if he values verifiable simplicity over cutting-edge complexity, he takes approach 2.
Which I assume minimizes the variables. If approach 1 is maximizing engineering potential, approach 2 is minimizing systemic waste and maximizing predictability.
Exactly the concept. If the primary goal of reason is to minimize complexity and keep every single variable completely verifiable, he might go for something drastically more pragmatic. The sources suggest a Tesla Model 3, or if we look at the European market, a highly compact EV like the Renault Zoe, the BMW i3, or even the Dacia Spring.
A Dacia Spring. I mean, for anyone unfamiliar, that is one of the most bare-bones, inexpensive electric vehicles you can possibly buy. It is the definition of a basic commuter appliance.
It really is.
It doesn't accelerate quickly. It has zero advanced luxury features. It literally just moves a physical body from point A to point B.
Which is precisely what makes it a Cartesian masterpiece. It represents minimizing complexity, minimizing financial cost, and keeping performance entirely transparent. There are no illusions with the Dacia Spring.
It doesn't pretend to have a soul.
Exactly. It is a mathematically sound, highly efficient appliance.
This dichotomy is brilliant. You have a 17th century genius, one of the greatest minds in human history, and if you drop him into a modern car market, he faces the exact same dilemma as any spreadsheet-loving buyer today. He is agonizing over whether to pay a premium for the ultimate spec sheet or buy the most budget-friendly, pragmatic commuter car simply because the math makes sense.
He'd be awake at 3 in the morning on internet forums, comparing the kilowatt-hour per mile efficiency of the Lucid Air against the total cost of ownership of the Dacia Spring.
We've literally taken a philosopher who changed human history and reduced him to an EV forum moderator arguing about drag coefficients.
It's hilarious. But stepping back, it really highlights how far we've actually come in realizing his vision of the world. The internal combustion engine was a brilliant but chaotic compromise with nature. We basically wrestled with fire to create motion.
And the electric vehicle, especially an autonomous one, is the realization of a 400-year-old philosophical prophecy.
We finally built the perfect machine he was dreaming of. Our sources tie this together beautifully. If he were alive today, surveying our grid-connected, geometrically calculating electric cars, his defining motto wouldn't just be the historic cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am.
Right.
His new conclusion would be cogito ergo grito elettrico. I think, therefore I drive electric.
I think, therefore I drive electric. That is amazing. It strips away all the marketing noise, the heritage, the nostalgia, and forces you to look at the machine purely as a mathematical solution to the problem of distance.
It is the physical manifestation of logic.
Which brings us perfectly to the end of our intellectual joyride today. And I want to leave you, listening right now, with a final provocative thought to chew on.
The practical application of all this.
Exactly. Next time you make a big purchase, it could be a car, a smartphone, or even a major appliance, apply a little Cartesian methodic doubt. Ask yourself, are you buying it for the chaotic emotion of the brand?
Are you paying a premium for a feeling, a badge, or an aesthetic that intentionally bypasses your logic?
Right. If you strip away the marketing narrative and demand empirical data, what is the most mathematically elegant, rational choice? You might find that the verifiable truth of what you actually need is very different from the story you've been sold.
Doubt everything until the data proves it clearly and distinctly. It is an incredibly powerful filter for navigating a world built on advertising.
It really is. Well, I want to explicitly thank you for sharing your time and joining us on this deep dive today. We know you have endless options for what to listen to, and we always appreciate you choosing to explore these bizarre and brilliant intersections of history and technology with us.
It's been a fantastic exploration.
And lastly, for everyone celebrating, we want to wish you a very happy Easter Monday, or Buona Pasquetta. We sincerely hope your holiday is filled with good data, exceptionally clear thoughts, and absolutely zero messy combustion engine chaos. Go enjoy the day, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive. Remember, keep thinking, because therefore you are.